Obviously, there were some very friendly Supreme Court rulings, and we're going to check in with our friend, Attorney Mark Weaver, who's going to weigh in on that, and I'm guessing a few other things as well. Mark, welcome, sir. How you doing? Good Tuesday to you.
Good morning. A beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day, and let me run things through the following lens, and then we'll go wherever you want. I always like when the Supreme Court does things that honor the Constitution. I don't look for the Supreme Court to stoke my political fires, so I don't like these rulings on the Alien Enemies Act or anything else that favors the Trump agenda because of political reasons. I want them to do things that don't allow other judges like Judge Boasberg to get in the way of what a president should do, no matter who the president is. Do you smell what I'm cooking here? Give me your thoughts on the rulings last night.
Well, we need to get more Americans thinking like you do. We shouldn't be looking for the result. We should be looking for the same process for everybody. And a key part of that is what constitutional analysts call the political question doctrine. All that means is that some cases shouldn't go to court. We leave it to the two political branches, the legislative branch, Congress, the executive branch, the presidency, and simply judges don't have a place. It's a well-settled notion, but it's been tossed out the window by the Trump haters who are desperate to get their own outcome. And we saw that in this case that culminated last night in this procedural ruling by the Supreme Court.
Now, and you use the exact right term, and a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, this was not a pronouncement, a broad pronouncement by the court that Trump was completely on solid ground conceptually. It was kind of procedural. So describe that adjective and what the ruling was and what it was not last evening.
Well, when you choose what court you're going to go to as a lawyer suing, you have to pick the court that has jurisdiction. That's the first choice you make. That's a location thing. And the second, you have to choose the right kind of lawsuit. And it looks like on both counts, the people suing the Trump administration failed on both counts, at least according to this 5-4 decision by the court. They shouldn't have been suing in Washington, D.C. They should have been suing in Texas, where these alleged gang members were removed from on their way to El Salvador. And number two, they shouldn't be coming in and quarreling with the president's power necessarily about this act, but rather they should be raising it individually, person by person, in what's called a habeas act. Habeas corpus, we've all heard that from Hollywood. People think that has something to do with murders. It really means give us the body. It's give us the person who's being wrongfully held. And it's typically done on a one-by-one case. So each individual person could bring his or her own separate case.
You mentioned a couple of moments ago the political question doctrine. I don't want to, and I seem to recall you phrasing it, that it seems like there's some things that are more for the legislature, more for the executive, that just shouldn't be in the judiciary's ballpark. A, what kind of things are we talking about? And B, can't anybody sue anybody for anything, and aren't all things ultimately possibly bound for the Supreme Court? So what kind of things would apply to that, hey, let's just not have judges mess with it standard?
Almost always it involves policy questions that involve discretion. The theory behind the political question doctrine is if you don't like the outcome of Congress, every 2 years you can elect a new member of Congress. If you don't like the outcome of the president, every 4 years you can change out who the president is. But if you don't like the outcome of the federal court, given that they are essentially lifetime protected, you have no recourse. And so questions of policy are best left to the branches that are closest to the people. In this case, it's also about who has the most information to know whether there's a predatory incursion. That's one of the phrases from the Alien Enemies Act. The executive branch should know whether or not countries like Venezuela are doing new kinds of asymmetrical warfare, slowly bringing people in from them to us, not in a across-the-border way we think about in old-style warfare, but more on a one-by-one or few-by-few. Who would know more whether that's happening? The executive that has all the classified information from our intelligence, or a federal district court judge with a couple hundred cases pending before him on any given day? He might be doing a search warrant, he might be doing a civil matter, or he might be figuring out whether Venezuela is trying to use a predatory incursion against our country. It's better done in the executive.
Gotcha. Is this the path that we've taken that leads us to district court judges in sometimes fairly obscure enclaves of America able to issue sweeping rulings that hamstring a president in the entire country?
That's certainly the flavor of the month during the first couple months of the Trump administration. The left was ready and angry to sue, and they picked their courts carefully. We call this forum shopping or judge shopping. They went to Washington because that bench is known for being more liberal, more anti-Trump. But they're also looking for what the Constitution would call inferior courts. That's not my term. That's the Constitution's term. Inferior courts to essentially supersede the President of the United States. And then they send their people out onto TV networks and reporters saying it's a constitutional crisis because the president is going along with this random federal district judge from this one place. That's not how these injunctions were designed. Surely you have to start somewhere. That's a district court. But at the point where it becomes a true separation of powers question is if the U.S. Supreme Court, which is in the Constitution, were to say to the president, as they did in the Nixon case, you must do X. And if the president doesn't do X, now you can tell me it's a constitutional crisis, potentially.
Attorney Mark Weaver is here. This might be more of a policy question than a legal question, but it's going to be legal at some point. We have this guy. We have this Maryland guy who either is or is not an MS-13 gang member. And the Trump folks kind of need to double down and go, oh, total gang member, while yet still seeming to simultaneously admit that it was a procedural error that got him shipped off to El Salvador in the first place. That's a little bit of a mess. It's one guy out of a large story that's going very, very well as we show people back to the country of their origin, as we should be doing. There are going to be hiccups. There are going to be mistakes. Does this seem like a mistake? And the Trump folks saying, we can't get the guy back. He's in Salvadoran hands. You've seen that. What's your thought on all of this?
Well, you forgot to say that the talking point of the left, he's a father. He was down at
he's a dad. He's just a loving dad.
He was building a lovely toy for his child just before he was going to volunteer at the local library restacking books. None of that is true, of course. This is almost certainly a gang member. A previous judge had ruled that he's a gang member. DHS has revealed images of his gang tattoos. That's not the only indicator they have. They have a judge saying that he was a gang member. And so let's be clear, a gang member, particularly a violent gang member, who's not allowed to be here in the first place, can be deported by this government. Now, if there is a mistake made along the way, perhaps there's judicial review of that mistake, but not because he's not a gang member. That's not the mistake that the administration is acknowledging. Remember, nothing any human enterprise does will be perfect, and government is a human enterprise. And so what the left is doing is trying to find what they think is a very comforting and warm image of a father being grasped from his loving family in Maryland, when they're really trying to say Donald Trump shouldn't be removing illegal aliens who pose a violent threat from the country.
Speaking of what you get to do and don't get to do when you're a guest in our country, let's spend a moment on Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia protester. Now, if you are a citizen and you are a student at Columbia and you're at a protest, yeah, you do indeed get to do that, and the history of such things in America is long and rich. But if it seems to be cozying up to a terrorist group and you are here as a guest of America, isn't Marco Rubio right that if you're doing things that if you did them in another country, we wouldn't let you in? If you do them in this country, we get to show you out.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of confusion on this point. The rights we have, not given to us by the Constitution, but recognized by the Constitution, are on a spectrum. Everyone, every human person in this country has the right not to be grabbed, thrown into a car, put into a dark cell, and tortured. It doesn't matter whether you're a citizen, whether you're a visitor. Everyone has that right. But citizens have more, for example, free speech rights than non-citizens. There are a lot of things you can do to get yourself kicked out of the country, even if you're here legally on a green card or a student visa. And the State Department and ultimately the president have the ability to say whether you're violating that. And in this case, this person is a supporter of Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist agency. It was already well established even before October 7th, but we all know now since October 7th, they're more so. Same as the Houthis. The Houthis are a known terrorist group targeting commerce. And so people who are advocating for terrorist groups that our country is working hard to fight do not have a right to be here, particularly if they didn't tell us they were going to do that when they applied to be here.
Last thing, because there needs to be, a lot of these rulings have said that President Trump, and part of this was part of last night, that he absolutely does have the wherewithal, the ability to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. It's going to be a big subject, I think, here in Trump 2.0 of who gets to stay and who gets to go. I keep hearing the notion that if you are targeted for deportation, you should get at least one good shot to argue before an immigration judge why you should not be deported. A, is that a worthy standard? And B, is it happening or not happening enough?
Well, we have the Supreme Court decision from last night, and although the majority did essentially remove the jurisdiction from this judge in Washington, there'll be a fight about that today. This judge in Washington is in earnest to try to slap some sort of punishment, contempt or otherwise on this White House. But he essentially his jurisdiction was taken away. My view is he can't even hear the case anymore. But what the decision did say was that there has to be some notice and opportunity, which is one of the basic core elements of due process. So that means you ought to be able to bring a habeas corpus case one by one now in Texas, your home state, not in the District of Columbia.
Mark Weaver, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you. Look forward to talking to you again. Chris's show, my show, anywhere. So it's great to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.